ways for women of the sexual realm. One of the reasons is she's funny. That's a good reason. And then, I don't know if you saw, she did what's called Jenga, because those questions were actually repugnant questions. They were so invasive and rude and having nothing to do with her gifts or her talent. And they were cloaked in having to do with her talent. Your fans want to see you do the important thing of singing, but not the sexual thing that you do. That was the implicit message. And remember, we're talking about underlying causes and conditions. So you can begin to hear those things. And I know she could hear them. You have to be able to hear them to be able to play with them and send them back the way she did. I'll try my best to not be a sex symbol. But what she ultimately, that's a certain level of, because the message is I can't help it. Sorry. That but doing it playfully in such a way that he did not get to have his arrow of scorn put inside of her. And then the question, what do you think about prostitution? Now, this is one of the things that, there's a very different training, and we'll talk about this, especially when we talk about the bite model, the anti-sex cult model, and all of the things that they do in order to hypnotize you into somehow perceiving that women owning sex is not the most noble and holy thing that could ever happen on the planet, and that the planet is in disrepair and disarray as a result of women not owning it, and solely for that reason. If you want to go down to the root cause and condition, and if anybody wants to argue this with me, we'll just travel all the way down together, and I'm going to show you all of the conditions that are a result of this root cause. I mean, it's just this cause, because the feminine is, as I said yesterday, it's wisdom, right? And so if you have wisdom that isn't being fed, then you have a culture with no wisdom. And it's also expanse. Masculine tends to be it's the phallus. It's a much more contracted experience. And so when you have any kind of ism, for example, it's a lack of wisdom that creates the ism. Does that make sense? You don't have room for those people, whatever those people are, them gays, or there's not room in this town for both of us. And so that's a lack of wisdom. It's a lack of expanse, and an ability to integrate and welcome difference is a lack of wisdom. And culturally, that's a lack of the feminine being located in the culture. The feminine is lacking. Oh, and so then I would say, the root cause of all suffering is perceived separation. It's perceived, from that perceived separation is perceived difference. And then from that perceived difference, if you are different from me, implicitly, inherently, and my mind moves very fast, so you can tell me if it's moving too fast. We can go on another question about this. So so wisdom can hold it all concurrently. Equals simultaneous attention on all things with equanimity. Okay, so that's where you start with wisdom. Then you move up, and if you're lacking one drop of wisdom, that's where separation begins, right? Suddenly, there's some concept that you are separate from me. Now, implicit in any idea of separation is if there's a me and a you, there's something that is against. There is something different in you, and what's different in you could threaten me. So with the arising of difference comes the arising of aggression. Okay, so then you begin to move up the ladder, and that's where you begin to see, suddenly I have to aggress, I have to conquer, I have to be right, I have to make my point. There's a whole series of things that I have to do as a result, all to protect this imaginarily separate me that occurred as a result of lack of wisdom and expanse. The lack of wisdom and expanse came from a lack of activation of what naturally occurs in the feminine form. And what activates it is sexual energies, right? So sexual energies are the, I ate this new kind of delicious licorice with lots of fennel, but it's a little sticky. Where was I? I don't even know where I was. So sexual energies are the antidote, not anecdote, antidote to all forms of aggression. In fact, true sexual energies are also the antidote to sex. So there you go. Something totally new arises, and we're going to, for purposes of ease, I'll just say profane and profound sex, right? And by the way, I'm not an against-y kind of girl. So if you're having the profane kind of sex, that's great. It's just going to cause you suffering. And so I wish I wish an end to suffering for all who wish an end to their own suffering. This is what I've learned. But I can tell you that if we built a grid of women who were connected and activated sexual energies, they would be able to absorb the aggression that happens at this tier that we see in these crazy, crazy forms of mechanized reality. I mean, now we're even mechanizing violence, which is just so crazy. I don't know if you've seen the literal robo cops in China and Singapore, and they're cops, like they have guns, but they're robots. I mean, that's just so scary to me, but it won't be, because I'll be extinct in about 10 years along with the rest of you. So we're we should enjoy it while we have it. Okay, so you go up to this place, and you're at the place where there is a need to protect and a need to conquer. And as a result, there is this form of aggression. Now, aggression tends to feed on aggression. And so, and it tends to feed on pain. So then what it does is it creates more pain in order to feed on it. Does that make sense? And that's when you end up in what's called samsara. Samsara is a merry-go-round of endless causes and conditions that only goes around and keeps promising you at some point you're going to get off. They talk about the metal monkey, chasing the metal monkey on the merry-go-round. And that's the idea. You can get this dog the dog is on a leash, and the monkey is here, and it's trying to chase the monkey, but it's not going anywhere, and it just keeps going around the same circle. We're the metal monkey, and we're the dog on the leash in that story. And so you want to get off of that cycle. You want to get off. I want to get us all off of that cycle. I want to get us all off. So anyway, here's today's joke. I like this one. I'm not interested in what's going on. I'm more interested in what the fuck is going on. I like that. Okay. And then your poetic quote of the day is Anne Sexton. I have maybe 5 favorite poets. Joseph Massey is one, and Octavia Paz. Anne Sexton is one, is what I'm saying. And she just has this one line: "My words will either attract a strong mind or offend a weak one." She wrote that in like the 70s, which is, it's important at this time. So then yesterday I was looking for this quote. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit to pick up some of the stuff that I was doing yesterday, and then we'll take off, and then we'll probably do some questions, because there were a few questions on Instagram. I think I translate fairly well in writing, but I think it's a little clearer in person. But it also, I go fast. I know I go fast. So if you have any questions and want any clarifications, I'm always happy to do that. Although we don't turn on the question section, so I'm always happy to do that every third talk, but we'll do that today. And then if you have anything, if not, I'll just do my usual. So this was when God was a woman, and this is one of those fundamental pieces that I include every third talk, because it's important to understand why I'm here talking about, you know, sacred prostitution against the what is it, as contradistinction to profane prostitution. And the idea of profane, oh, I know what I was looking for. I know what I was looking for. Just one moment, I want it, because I really have to share this with you. And that is this word, Arachnonic, which is the idea of there's a demon force or devil force, according to Rosicrucians, and who did the schools? Montessori? No, Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner writes a lot about this, and the idea is that what this demon force does is it takes, and this is the crux of everything that I'm saying, is the crux of everything that I say is really this: there is the ineffable, there is the limitless, there is the infinite, there is the invaluable, there is the incalculable, the inestimable. And what this force does is it takes it down and it tries to commoditize it. And it tries to make it transactional. And it has you start keeping track and keeping count in order to take something so profound, say, as love. And all of a sudden you feel this expanse of love. And then you go into, do they love me more, or do I love them more? And then you go into, wait a minute, I did dishes last time. And then pretty soon you're in that tit for tat or that accounting mode. And our entire culture has been taken over by this force. And so what I look for is the originally profound form of all things. That's how I did the work that I did in turning prisons to monasteries. There's a profound form before all of our transactional, and by transactional, you did something wrong, so you are going to be punished. And these are the numbers and the classifications of how we're going to categorize the pain that you caused, and you're going to pay in this way. And see, in my mind, that demonic force has entered as soon as you're thinking that way. And so instead, what I say is, oh, you strayed away from karma, from your own karma, from other people's karma. And how do we repair that? It's the question. It's a different mindset. And in order to actually ever bring repair, and everything I say is pragmatic. This is going to be the hardest thing for people to understand, because we have such a punitive culture. That we have this idea that that punishment works. And this is what I did this terrible interview with this just rotten woman. I mean, I put her in prison. No, she was just a really indoctrinated into the anti-sex cult, powerful indoctrination. And she just could not understand. She could not understand why I was saying it's something like assault on a woman is a multivariate issue. You can't have a univariate solution. It doesn't work that way. Just waiting until a woman is violated and then throwing her in her too, in another way, throwing him in prison. And what I said to her was, I'm pragmatic. She was saying, don't you think this is a male apologist? And I said, no, I'm pragmatic. I want to end rape on the planet. And so if you really want to do that, if you don't just want to be sitting there drunk on your outrage, my favorite, what do I like to say? I like to say, if religion is the opiate of the masses, then outrage is the methamphetamine. And we are meth heads in the United States right now. We are just jacked up on our outrage. And but see, the problem with outrage, there are many problems. There are many problems with any kind of addiction, but the problem with outrage is it makes you think you're doing something. And all you're doing is you're expending the fuel that has built up that our God-given fuel that we're given in order to drive into the new reality, in order to pierce this reality, in order to go into the new place. in order to create the new alternative. So for example, I was really pissed off about the way prisons were. Well, I could just yell at people, or I could build the prison to monasteries program. I was devastated. Food insecurity is insane to me, that we have food insecurity on this planet. It's bonkers. There's no reason for it. There's just no reason. And, you know, I had been food insecure, and I remember just sitting there with my rage, eating my freaking, you know, they give away free food, and the free food they give away is all sugar and carbs. And I remember just thinking, this is going to kill me. And, you know, this is terrible. And I remember saying, I'm going to do something. And so you're given that rage in order to make change. But if you spend it, you know, on these imaginary solutions that are called social media rants, then what ends up happening is you're exhausted. That's all that happens, is you just shoot your wad all over. You're just coming all over everybody with your big angry ejaculate, and then and everyone has the spray all over them, and then you just have to, you know, do the post-coital nap, and then that's another samsara. It's just an endless cycle of that. And you can see, when you look at social media, which I've had to study in order to understand how things work, you can see the inflation. The minute you see any kind of reactive inflation to anything that happens, you know, it's like California wildfires. And that again is a lack of sexuality. It's a lack of that fertile, fecund, well taken care of soil. Has it be that any kind of fire spreads really quickly. So you just see some kind of paranoid presumption about an interpretation of what something means, and it's just spreading, and everyone's beginning to make everybody more scared, and then you're scared, and then because you're scared, all you can do is be angry and more outraged. That's just samsara. We are in super aggression level samsara, and we have to bring it down. We got to have some sex. And in order to actually get, you know, I'm a big soil advocate too, along with John Liu. I mean, so much so that I made everyone watch Kiss the Ground, watch Kiss the Ground. And because I do believe that, very much like John Liu says, or my hero, oh, this is my favorite person. If ever you see him, tell him he's my hero, Zach Bush. I think he's just a genius. He really understands ecology, because he understands not just natural ecology, he understands human ecology, just ecology, humans within the ecology. Brilliant mind. And he just says very simple that, you know, the soil is the lungs of the planet. And if you want to end, like climate change, it can be solved by healing the soil to make it absorb carbon. That's what it's here to do. We just have leached it of its potential to do that. The same is true for women. The same is true. We're here to draw in all of that aggression that is fire up here, that is climate change up here. We're here to draw that in, but we've just leached the soil, and we haven't resourced it again with sexuality. I don't know if everybody has an associative mind, but if you don't, and you listen to me, I don't know why you would listen to me, because I would sound like a crazy woman. But I promise you, there is a place where I make sense, and it's usually tripping. But it's funny, because one time I said to somebody, I said, I think I want to call my book Method to My Madness. And they were very nice to me. They said, what you're saying isn't madness, Nicole, it's actually sanity. So I only listen to them and not all of the other people who say I'm a mad woman. But so that's what I'm saying. That's what it comes down to. So I go to the female religion section, and the female that I was going to refer to yesterday, isn't actually integral to this part of the conversation, but as we make our journey through ancient history, Babylonian history, we went through Greece, you know, we popped into the Hebrew Bible, we popped into these various places. And so we'll just we're right at the edge of those terrains in history. This is when God was a woman. This is what crosses us over, okay? And really what we're doing is making the distinction between profound and profane. And the beautiful thing is that once you see everything as profound, you don't really care if anybody's doing anything profane because it looks profound to you. So it's a funny thing. As soon as you click over the vision where you see everything as a certain kind of beautiful interconnected light, then a lot of judgment just falls away. The only thing you don't want is for people to suffer. That's really what it boils. Or you kind of want people to go beyond suffering into actual play. That's nice too. But so anything I say, if it isn't from judgment. I'm a researcher. And I was like, I have to know how this profane world works. And I want to know it from the bottom up. I want to hookah until I can't breathe. Okay. So this is never that. This is never a prescription. It's always just descriptions. And then it is kind of, if you have had a really profound experience, you want to share it with others who may be interested in visiting those locations. That's how I look at it. But I was just hearing something fantastic from this other neuroscientist that I like. I can't ever remember his name, but he's quite good. And he was saying that we don't like to be told what to do. We don't like to be told what to do because the natural reward system in the brain rewards us when we come up with something and then we meet the goal. But if somebody tells us what to do, that interferes with that reward system. So they're taking away our basic dopamine. And so I very rarely like to tell people what to do. Every now and then, if somebody's cutting off their foot or something, don't do that. But if it's just ethical, each person has their own set of ethics, is how I feel about it. But that being said, there is a curtain, there is a membrane, there is a valence. There is a world on this side of the curtain and the valence, and there is a world on this side. Not everyone has been to this side, in this life. The world is radically different once anybody touches this side of it. Rumi talks about it out in the pasture beyond right doing and wrong doing. It's a very different and disorienting mindset shift. And, there are those who choose to live over there. I don't think it's any better to live over there. I just think it's important to touch in over there, then come back here and, bring some lunch for people. That's the best way I know to do it. But so this is from When God Was a Woman. In most archaeological texts, the female religion is referred to as a fertility cult, perhaps revealing the attitudes towards sexuality held by various contemporary religions that may have influenced the writers. But archaeological, and see, this is the part that we don't realize. And I want, just for fun, if you get a chance, just read anything, just a magazine article, a book, anything, and just notice that there's an element, even if what they're saying you don't agree with, of authority, because you're seeing it on a written page. And this really is how these ideas come to be pervasive. Just, and then you think about it. I really think about it. Okay, I want you to think about most of you, I don't know. You're over, I don't know how old you are, but we're just going to say, we're just going to say you're 30 or over. I'm going to say that. And if you're not, you're smart because you're here. So most of these people who wrote these books, these canons, these most important literary masterpieces and spiritual masterpieces, were in their 30s. So they're no older than you. And suddenly they're writing something from a learned position of authority, as if they know more than you. And then these ideas get passed on. So some 30-year-old kid whose girlfriend probably didn't have very much sex, so he wasn't very smart. He probably didn't have a lot of wisdom, is writing these things, and then people are reading them as if they are the gospel, and then passing them to other people, and then beating people up with these words that this 30-year-old sexless dude wrote. So I just want to say we give a lot of value to these things, and we might actually, if you're over the age of 30, and if you're not a dude also, but if you're a dude, if you're over the age of 30, you might just say, I know as much as they know. I know as much as they knew. And begin to do some kind of self-reference on what feels true. My prayer is that everyone does that. That would be my prayer, that everyone just does some kind of deep-seated, my only aim with anybody, all of these talks I do, is just keep pointing out, you have the plug, here's the socket. You have the plug, here's the socket. You have the plug, here's the socket. But as soon as you get plugged in, you're plugged into, I don't know, I don't want to say this because it sounds so true, but like you're plugged into the internet. We'll say you are plugged into, they call it like the Akashic records. You have as much access as anybody else once you're plugged in. So just get it plugged in is always, that's always my aim, is for everyone to have that. And here's the thing. You kind of know who's plugged in and who's not, You know what I mean? Who was it? Bukowski said, I think it was Bukowski, you know a free woman or a free person by how you feel when you're in their presence. If you're just a little bit uplifted, they're probably plugged in, If you're a little bit growly, they're probably not. And people vacillate, in Buddhism, up until you're an 8th level bodhisattva, your lights are flickering. Around the 8th level, you're just like, your lights are on. And then it gets more great. And then pretty soon you're just a big celestial mansion that people come into. But anyway, paying closer attention to semantics. Sorry. Archaeological and mythological evidence of the veneration of the female deity as creator and lawmaker of the universe, prophetess, provider of human destinies, inventor, healer, hunter, and valiant leader in battle suggests that the title fertility cult may be a gross oversimplification of a complex theological structure that was so when God was a woman prior to my friend Jesus's Bible, okay? Paying closer attention to semantics, subtle linguistic undertones and shades of meaning, I noticed the word cult, which has implicit connotations of something less fine or civilized than religion, was nearly always applied to the worship of female deities. This is by the, God was no longer a woman at this point. This was in the male structures. And they're writing about the time when God was a woman. And lo and behold, they apply this less fine and civilized term, not by ministers of the capital C church, but presumably objective archaeologists and historians. And I think that's another important point. I mean, I'm a semanticist. We use scientific method. So I love science, okay? Love science. I do not like scientism. And those two are getting very confused at this point in history. It's just to say, I feel that way about everything. We go back to that demon energy. The minute science has an agenda, it's scientism, and then it is the opposite the opposite of science, which is wisdom and so expansive and curious and constantly changing. And you discover, because that's the nature of science, you discover that this was true here. And we discovered something, and either it's shifted or it's not true. But if it's not dynamic, it's not science in my mind, because like they say in my book, Language and Thought and Action, life is a whirling mass of atoms. And so for it to be fixed, and then to study it and in a way that perceives it as fixed, is just inaccurate. The rituals associated with the Judeo-Christian Yahweh were always respectfully described by the same scholars as religion. It was upon the words God or even He, each time carefully begun with capital letters, while Queen of Heaven, Goddess, and She were most often written in lowercase. My friend Topeka, she might be here tomorrow. My friend Topeka and I, there's this video of these women, these Black women, and they sit together, and one woman will say something like, "You need to just clap back when someone does that," and then all the other women go, That's how I feel when I read that line. Okay. And she were most often that I decided to try it the other way about, observing how these seemingly minor changes subtly affected the meaning as well as the emotional impact. And so one of the many books that I worked on, I think I ended up integrating it into erotic justice, was really how to think. I think thinking is seeing. Wisdom thinking is much more challenging than we realize, because really what real thinking is one thing: noticing. That's all it boils down to. You notice when I put it in a capital letter, it has this impact. When I don't put it in a capital letter, it has this impact. You notice how you begin to watch the news and you're like, oh, this is just an exercise in pre-digested propaganda. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Joe Rogan thing, where everyone is saying the exact, there's 30 different newscasters all saying the exact same thing, and you realize, whoa, this whole thing is staged. And so if it's staged, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can look at it like a really intense video game, but you want to be able to see or think your way through it and not actually just be carried around by it. Mm-hmm. So I'm finishing up the Sacred Prostitute. So the Sacred Prostitute did not make love in order to obtain admiration or devotion from the man who came for her. Can you imagine a woman, any woman on the planet ever, making love not in order to obtain admiration or devotion from a man? Can you imagine any woman having that kind of autonomy, that constant, chronic, eternal outward seeking weren't operational with the most powerful act on the planet, that it weren't transactional, that it weren't infected by that demon force that we talked about that makes things transactional, and that actually she was plugged in enough to have her own current, so that she wasn't using her sexual energy in order to get anything. Like my girl Bonnie Blue, who had so much pleasure in her body, it would be a shame to not share it with 1,029 men in 12 hours. She did not require a man to give her a sense of her own identity. Rather, this was rooted in her own womanliness. What? So I just want to say, we talk about, oh, we've made so much progress. We've made so much progress with feminism. I just want to say, this was BC. I love you, Gloria Steinem. But girl, we went in the wrong direction. Okay, sorry. I went to court today. Forget. I'm just. It is so much fun. Our own woman, Qualls was the writer. Also equated censuring sacred prostitution to demonize female sexuality and vitality. Oh my God. In her temple, men and women came to find life and all that it had to offer in sensual pleasure and delight. But with the change in cultural values and the institutionalization of monotheism and patriarchy, the individual came to the house of God to prepare for death. I'm just gonna say that again, because that's some heavy shit. So in the temple of the goddess, and now mind you, this is the prostitution temple, and the temple of the goddess, men and women came to find life in all that it had to offer, in sensual pleasure and delight. But when we no longer permitted those temples, with the change in cultural values and the institutionalization of monotheism and patriarchy that knocked that out, now the individual was left with a church, and they came to the house of God to prepare for death. And I would say that fundamental, so we talk again about going to ground and the seeds of karma and the realities that they produce. And that's one of those shifts. That's a profound karmic seed shift, to go from ritual and expression being toward life, and these rituals and these belief systems being to prepare for death. That's the choices that you make that are, once you go this way and this way, are radically different choices, and the experiences that you have are radically different from that single seed. That single seed will produce two entirely different realities. This is from, so in the book, What Women Want, Daniel Bergner Science. It's interesting because one of the questions is always, well, what happened, and how can it be that this is our source, right? This is our fuel source. And then most women, as far as I can tell, are sexually anorexic, and a whole series of things that come from that. Because once you're low Eros, there's a whole series of things that happen. Either you have to be extraordinarily controlling, like the anorexic that can't take in food. So you have to constantly control your environment because you're constantly controlling your hunger. Or you have to be radically dependent because you don't have, as these women did, their own source. Remember yesterday we were talking, and the women who were the sacred prostitutes had access to all of the boons that men did. No other women did. The wives didn't. They could have land. The lineage was passed down in their name because these women were standing in their own power. But as soon as you move from that power, then what happens is you become dependent in some way. And so while, work is, work is, takes effort, we'll say. I'll put it as neutral a way as I can. And the work of spiritual enlightenment is difficult. The work of production is difficult. The work of maintaining your erotic self is difficult. I said, I do believe that the biggest misunderstanding that we have about sexuality is that it's supposed to be pleasurable, and that if it's not pleasurable, it's necessarily a violation. That's where we get really screwed up, and that's where women have cut their sexuality off. But I like what, so somebody said, well, scientifically, this is what they were noticing, is that these women, let me see if I could, I hope this is it. We just hope this is it. So genital blood throbbed, this is the science, when the tapes described X-rated episodes with female friends, but the throbbing for female strangers was twice as powerful. Isn't that interesting? The broad-chested male friends were deadening with them. The vaginal pulse almost flatlined. The male strangers stirred 8 times more blood. Cheever's subjects maintained that the strangers aroused them least of all the men they heard about. The lie detector said the exact opposite. The lie detector said the exact opposite. So that much of the book is women reporting, self-reporting on their experience, and then the galvanic skin response and various tests that they use to see what the body's actually saying. And why is it that those are in contradistinction? Why is it that a woman is saying, no, that didn't turn me on at all, and she's just throbbing and pulsing and hot and blood is stirring? What is that? And then what she said as the reason was, being a human who is, she's very economist, being a human who is sexual, she said, who is allowed to be sexual, is a freedom accorded by society much more readily to males than to females. Her lie detector tests were unequivocal. So that's what started to happen, is that suddenly we made that shift, right? And the shift being from the sacred prostitute realm, where who we are, what we are is noble and honorable and life-giving, to this place of beginning to worship death with a lot of thou shalts, a lot of thou shalts. And the thou shalt not be a sexual woman is one of those. And so then what ends up happening is that the woman has to put an overlay. Remember, if you may not remember, but I was talking about the autonomic nervous system, or the voluntary nervous system has control over the parasympathetic, the involuntary nervous system. And so you can think, thoughts that you have can make your body contract against arousal in such a way that you don't register it in the mind. And most of women spend their lives living in that place, believing that the pre-programmed ideas of who they are, who they should be attracted to, what conditions they should be attracted inside of, they believe that that's real because they've contracted their body against the naturally arising dynamic activity that would signify or signal something different. And so we're like this. No, I'm not turned on at all by that. No, I only like monogamy. See, it's all I ever think about. And so this is part of, when we're talking about the anti-sex cult, that's how it works. That's what it plays on. It plays on knowing that all human beings by nature want to be good. We want to be good. I've never met anybody who genuinely, George Thorogood or something, wanted to be bad. I don't, that's just not how it works. We're social animals. So human belonging is very important. So then we look for signifiers of what good is. We actually aren't taught the Buddha's way, see for yourself as the highest and most noble thing that exists. And so then what we do is we take the off-the-rack ideas. The off-the-rack ideas have pre-built pre-embedded instruct body instructions that anytime this happens, you open, which is very rare in our culture. Anytime this happens, you close. Anytime this happens, you ignore it. And that is why I say the only work that I think will move the needle on the planet. And, you know, we don't have much time. In 2034, we will be more, they're estimating, and I think it's actually conservative, more AI than carbon. You know, so I don't know. I would figure this out now is what I'm saying. Because I can tell you from psychedelics that there is a place where you had better, you're in space. You know, I can tell you this from meditation. I can tell you this from Om. There's a place where you're in space, and the only thing that you have is the muscle memory of pre-programming of your ideas and deprogramming of the ideas that were put in you in order to move without fear. Really, you know, in order to have those pre-programmed contractions. So the idea, you know, of just following these programs. No, I only like this. I hate this. I don't even pay attention to that. Don't do that. Begin to look at where those threads come from. Well, oh, lo and behold, there's only one way to actually do it, which is what I've been saying forever. And that is to break through the valence of good and bad. That valence is called the ego. And you're either going to spend your life on this side, and you can decorate it. You can do whatever you want. I mean, it doesn't, you can invite people in there with you. I see lots of couples who are just living on this side together. There's a whole series of things that you can do. And but really, you're just living in, what is that, backwash or something? You're just living. There's no circulation in that place. It's just this little enclosed area of pre-programmed preferences. If you actually want to go out into the land beyond right doing and wrong doing, out into where there's open breath, you have to break through that valence. There are certain ways to break through the valence that are great. Yoga, meditation, extreme or freestyle sports, art, real art, sex. That's it. Really, I mean, there are some other things I'm sure you can do, Ikiban or something, but stick with these for the most part. You can do whatever you want, but there's actual cartography for these areas. So I like to go off-roading, but I don't like to go off-skying, you know. I like relatively, although I've been out there too. So and the once you break through, there's this ability, and I would describe the mystical experience as some form of, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be like that. Wait a minute, I could be 6 feet tall right now, and then I could touch the ceiling. Oh, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be that I don't see all the deities that are here in the room right now. Oh, wait a minute, I could be light. Oh, wait a minute, there's all of these other experiences, because suddenly you aren't bound by the constructs of this ego that anytime, you know, incoming phenomena happens, all that happens is the pre-written script comes up, and it tells you how to think, how to feel, how to react. Yeah, all of that's just pre-written, and that's all you do. You spend your life. That's what autopilot is. You know, someone says, you're a bitch, and it's that, no, I'm not. I'll show you, bitch. And you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be at the mercy of anyone or anything at any point for the rest of your life. That is the promise. See, I think the Buddha makes this other promise, the end of suffering. A Sicilian makes the promise, you don't have to be at the mercy of anyone or anything. But that experience that anyone could say anything to you, anyone could do anything, anything could happen. and you don't have to respond in any given way. That you just have infinite responses, probably not infinite, but you have myriad responses available in that moment, and you get to choose the response that feels best for you. That is the promise, as far as I can. No, fuck that. That's the promise, period. But you have to see for yourself. You have to see for yourself. You have to break through that valence. And I'll just tell you one last thing. My dear friend Aubrey and I had many conversations about this, because breaking through that valence, you feel fear and anxiety on this side, but it's an actual death in the bardo, in the valence experience. And so all practice is for the experience of breaking through. Everything that you go through is for the experience of breaking through. And so terror is magnified infinitely when you're in it, trying desperately to shoot you backward, back into the backwash. That's back into that, old familiar place. And so to learn how to have your system ultimately relax in incredible duress, that's the thing that transforms that terror into ecstasy. And terror and ecstasy are the exact same thing, with one thing missing, and that's judgment. So all practice is to dissolve judgment, so that when you go through that experience, you don't lock in judgment. You aren't just there frozen. You can actually make it to the place of your own birthright. So seems good. Are there any questions?
Yeah, we have a lot of questions from Instagram.
Okay.
We'll start.
Okay, look, if Topeka doesn't come tomorrow, I'll answer all questions, just so you know. And if you have a question, write the question and I'll answer it. If Topeka comes tomorrow, we'll just chat, and then I'll answer it the next day. If she doesn't come, then I'll do it tomorrow. But your questions mean the world to me, so I want to make sure that I get them all. So you can send them and Karen will collect them.
Yeah. So Porcia says, how does a woman get to that place where she can connect to her sexuality without the need for anything external? I know there are no formulas, but is it a matter of having enough sex that a flip finally switches?
Well, my dear, that is a really tricky question for this person. I'm in an intimate relationship with the government right now, and it's a very tricky question. But I will say, here's where I'm going to start. Let me actually dial it way back to here and say, I trust you. That's the first thing I'm going to say. I remember the first time someone actually said that to me. Because I was just like a question monster, and I had been trained to outsource my answers, and they just said, you know what, I trust you. And I used to cry a lot more then, but I just started crying, and I couldn't figure out, why am I crying? I think I even said it, and they just said that's the experience of coming home. So first and foremost, I trust you to. I trust that you know. I knew. I just didn't know that I knew. When we do Women Over Dinner, I often say that the biggest thing a woman can offer another woman, especially a woman who's been seasoned for a bit, is the reflection that you know better than I could ever know. And then what I'll say is my experience. And my experience, there's a poem, there are a few poems that I'll just always recite. I don't know any of them. I just will point to them and then kind of give you a vague understanding of the poem, because I don't memorize things well. But it's there's a thread that runs through it. And the idea is that there's this thread that's just running through life, and it's invisible. But if you follow it, then you always end up in the right place wherever you are. You may not be safe in everyone's understanding. You may not be pretty in, I have my not so pretty moments. You may be argumentative. There's a whole, but something in you will feel, this is crazy, but this is the right place. I just know this is right. This is right. And if you have a fidelity to that, and that's what I would suggest is, find that place inside of you and vow fidelity to it. It will take you there. Now, here's the challenge. It's a thug. And what I mean by that, is it's a very Italian, we have what are called thugs, meaning like you make an agreement with us, we keep the agreement is how we work. So the idea is if you make that agreement, you have to do what it says for it to continue communicating to you. That's, like you can't activate it and then be like, no, not that one. The last thing I'll say on this is there's this idea of Tara, in Tibetan Buddhism, Tara, there are the basic Taras. Tara is considered the mother of Tibetan Buddhism. But somebody once said to me this beautiful thing, and that is, Tara's just there trembling, waiting for you to ask for help. And that's such a beautiful way to imagine your reality. It's just there, just waiting for you to ask for help. So you asked me, and what I'm going to say is ask that one inside of you that knows, and it will take you there, provided you do what it says, provided you follow the protocol. All protocols, if you quit before the end of a protocol, you're sicker than you were when you started. If you take 12 of 13 penicillin, then the illness comes back in a more virulent way. So you have to vow, you have to really take a vow if you want to do that journey. But it will take you, and it'll take you to the point regularly where you're sure that it's more than you can handle, and it never will be more than you can handle.
Okay, we probably have time for one more, so we'll do Janice. How does this translate into long-term partnership or traditional marriage?
However you want it to. I think that, so when, unconditional freedom is freedom in all conditions. So the question is, and so one of the things that I teach is how to find unconditional freedom inside of prisons. We turn prisons to monasteries, and I make the promise that it can be found right there where you are. I make the promise where anybody is. It doesn't matter your condition. It doesn't matter. In fact, you're given in certain kinds of tantric Buddhism, the belief is you are given the specific conditions that you have, because working them will transform you into the person you were meant to be. So you being in a long-term marriage, in my mind, okay, those are the conditions that inside of you will become I assume you identify as a woman from what I'm hearing, but maybe not, maybe whatever. Have you become the person? Have you become realize, get brighter, more radiant, more alive inside of those conditions? So then you say, wow, right now, my partner is suffocating me, we'll say. I think that is different from freedom. How do I find freedom here according to the person that I am? That's your question. According to the person that I am, how do I find freedom here? And if I can guarantee you that if you make freedom your priority, and you freedom period though, their freedom too, if you make freedom the priority, you will find it in such a way that both people can find full realization inside of this connection.
Okay, wonderful. We'll finish the rest of these questions either Saturday or Sunday, and we'll take 2 or 3 short reflections. If you can raise your virtual hand online, and anyone in the room can also do a reflection.
I love, to the person who asked the first question, I loved the question of this. It felt like such a vulnerable thing to ask, and be responded to in such a large group of people, like everyone here listening and also learning. So I really appreciated the vulnerability of the question and the honesty of the inquiry.
We'll go to the land.
We're there. Oh, you don't have audio. Okay, good.
There was, this moment today when you just gave that reflection of and I trust you, and then went into where it just felt like such a deep exhale. And it was yesterday or the other day where I had that same exhale where you're like, it's whatever works. And so I just love and appreciate that permission so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll see you all tomorrow and Sunday.
Okay, tomorrow's at 1, right?
Yeah.
Tomorrow's at 1 if you want to come.